Hey, Alyssa, here we are again. It's PTSD Awareness Month, and we are talking a lot about PTSD. And this episode, we're going to talk about PTSD in the life model, right? And so I'm just thinking about Dr. Wilder, the main neurotheologian and clinical psychologist with life model. He talks about in his early years as a trauma therapist that he would work a lot with people who had DID, from ritualistic abuse. And he mentioned that they figured that it would cost $5 million to treat one person with dissociative identity disorder, formerly multiple personality disorder. And the reason for it was because they would have to hire a whole community to help recalibrate and rewire the brain of this person, because that's how we change in community. That's how we change.
Yeah.
And so, they're at their original counseling practice, the Shepherd's House in California. They were inviting Jesus into the room. They were getting their healing from these different things. And then as the life model, the authors, those original authors, they figured out some things that are now 20, 30 years later, we're utilizing these things in practice. It might even be 40 years later. We're utilizing these things in practice, and they're game changers. That's what I've noticed.
Right.
The life model approach to trauma, as a trauma therapist, as a certified EMDR therapist, life model and the concepts in life model are so effective and so efficient in treating trauma.
Yeah. Well, and really to piggyback off of that story about Jim Wilder, it's what drove him to dig into this, right? He's like, this is not effective. There's so many people hurting. There's no way that we can do this one client at a time. There's just not enough money, right? When you hear a stat like that, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a problem. It needs to be fixed. And he really started digging in and going, there's got to be other ways to do this. And so the life model pulling in all these concepts where it's like, man, we are designed to heal in relationship, in joyful, secure relationship. And so we've got to figure out a different way to do this outside of just, people being able to afford counseling for years and years and years.
Exactly. Right? Like this idea of the self-propagating joy movement, right? That gets me pumped. I remember him talking about one of his colleagues saying, I'm committing my life to serving the victims of, or the survivors of one pedophile. Like 250 people or something. They said that, right? But Wilder's like, but you're one person, and this pedophilic pornographic culture we live in is propagating itself quickly, so fast. And so the victims, the survivors of one pedophile are all just then 40% of them are perpetuating violence on the next generation. And then it's just multiplying itself, versus a joy propagating movement, which is life model, is going to propagate itself faster than addiction, faster than pedophilia.
That's
right? Because the brain, if we can work from the front of our brain rather than the back of our brain and treat trauma from that way, we're going to be so much more effective. And that's why I'm so passionate. You're so passionate. We're so passionate at Center for Transformation Institute that if therapists as the silent influencers of culture are able to get these concepts, this can go so much faster. We can help people.
That's right.
We can help people so much more quickly.
That's right. Just the ripple effects of it, the multiplication that happens. Because as just what you're saying, I love that phrase that joy propagates faster than fear. And you can tag on a lot of other words to the end of that statement. And the other thing is that a lot of what the life model teaches is that because of joy, because we're getting into the front part of our brain, we're not just treating symptoms at this point. This is holistic healing that is happening where we are seeing lives changed and transformed, and a transformed life transforms lives, right? And this is where you see the multiplication happen. When my life has changed, I then go and spread that, because joy can be spread and propagated very
That's
easily.
right. And that's how we can pull in like Dan Siegel, interpersonal neurobiology, or where a lot of this research comes from is Alan Shore and all of the work that he's done on right brain psychotherapy and such. Like, I remember in the book Transforming Fellowship, they say it's kind of strange to think that the client is receiving a permanent copy of the therapist's brain in exchange for a fee. That, you know, our energy and how we're showing up in the room is what's actually doing the work. And if we are not organized in our system and integrated, we're not going to be able to be as transformational. So we have to be transformed to be transformational. So the way I want to just kind of articulate this is that when it comes to, you know, PTSD Awareness Month, when we think about it from a life model lens, trauma is a little bit differently explained, right? We talk about suffering being alone and in pain. I'm sorry, trauma being something that's overwhelming. I said that wrong. Trauma is being alone and in pain, is the way that Joyful Journey talks about it, right? And so one definition would be trauma is anything that overwhelms our capacity to process life and causes us to disconnect from ourselves and others, disrupts our ability to stay relational, stay connected in joyful community. And they even say in Joyful Journey, it's like, something's happening to me and no one else can share the impact of it. So I feel alone, and then I shut down, my relational circuits go off. I isolate myself. Things get very disorganized internally. Versus suffering, which is, I can suffer and not be traumatized because I can suffer and be with others.
Yes, which is such a huge difference, right? I tell people oftentimes, you know, a lot of the work that I'm doing, I feel like I'm teaching people to suffer well, which they don't, that doesn't sound great, right? It's not a great advertisement because no one wants to suffer. But in reality, that's life, right? We all go through hardship. We all go through painful experiences. And I liken it to going to the gym. We voluntarily sign ourselves up for pain, right? For the purpose of growth. There's something on the other side of it. I don't enjoy going to the gym oftentimes. It hurts a lot, but I see something on the other side of it. And in the same way, the life model really, differentiates trauma from suffering well, because it's like, we're all going to go through this, but it doesn't have to be a traumatizing experience when we learn the tools to be in joyful community and do it well together, right? It's a very different experience.
And I think life model would go on to say that suffering well is something as believers that we are to do. This is part of it. In the world we will have trouble. That's a promise from the Word of God. And I'm even thinking about the scripture where Jesus models suffering. He says, you know, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Right?
That's right.
He endured it on purpose. He went into suffering on purpose because of the purpose in it.
Right? That there was joy in that for him, which is pretty phenomenal to think about. As he's about to suffer and go on the cross, he's saying, I do it because there is joy in it. Because it allows for like this attachment repair, right? It allows us to come back into relationship with him, which is such a huge component of the life model, and how we are able to also suffer well and work through things like PTSD. We have to be able to do it together.
And so that makes me also think about this idea that if I'm going to suffer well, I've got to develop more maturity and capacity. That's why we don't suffer well. Like, think about, like, okay, you have your first child, they're up all night long. You've never done that before. Your capacity for that is not there. How do you grow it? Because you
Right.
look at that little baby and it's so cute, so sweet, and I love the baby. So
Yeah.
then I grow more maturity. That's how more maturity is grown, through the stress. There's always, life model would say, there's always a high stress before we reach the next level of maturity. And that's what it means to suffer. Like,
Yeah.
I can suffer well without being traumatized because I can stay relational in difficulty,
Yes.
right? And so,
100%. Well, and I think that exactly what you're saying, even in that, we also have people with more mature brains, hopefully, in our community that come around side of us as a new mom and say, hey, here's some tools and things to do in this hard time in life, right? We have people that are glad to be with us in our suffering who can also be a living model for us and help us grow.
yes, so good. So good. And we really can't do it all the time. Like, there's a concept in life model of being tender to weakness of others, but also being
Yeah.
tender to your own
Mhm.
weakness. Like, when I was just a mom and I'm
Yes.
up all night with this baby, I'm like, I can't do this. I could judge and blame myself,
Right.
but reality is I haven't grown the capacity yet. Let me be tender to myself, gentle with myself,
Right.
and still head in to
Right.
the growth, head into the dark night, the difficulty, so that I can keep
Yeah.
growing, and opening myself up to that. I used to get kind of confused on this concept because I was like, okay, if I'm not showing up mature, I'm having these deep emotions, like, what am I supposed to do here? I'm confused.
Right.
How can I grow that maturity? Well, it starts with this idea of, I'm not feeling like acting the way I want to act, but I'm going to go ahead and act the way I don't feel like acting. The DVT
Yeah.
says act opposite all the way. Right.
Yeah.
And that's at first what it looks like to suffer well. Like, I don't feel like showing up like
Yes.
this. I feel like yelling,
Right.
screaming, cussing this person out, whatever I feel like doing, but I'm not going to do that because
Yeah.
I know who I am. Wilder would say the best way to mature is to remind yourself, when you're feeling a certain way, who you really are in your true identity.
Hmm.
No.
Yeah. Which again is why we need community around us, right? Because sometimes we need help with those reminders. Hey, I need to speak identity over you. This is who you
Right.
are, even in a moment where you're really
Yeah.
struggling. And so, yeah, looking at working with people with PTSD and what that looks like in the life model, I love that the life model comes at it from so many different angles where there's joy building,
Mhm.
right? It's how do being glad to be with somebody in their pain is a transformational
Yes.
experience. I remember even having a really hard day one day, calling a mentor. She came over, and at the end, I mean, it was such a hard conversation to talk through. And at the end, she said, Alyssa, it's always such a joy to be with you. And I'm like, right now it is, right? But that's what life model teaches, right? Is that there's, when we're sitting with people in PTSD, having somebody that's glad to be with you in it, because we have the capacity
Yeah.
to, right? It changes
Right.
us. It also helps to repair our attachment, which is amazing, especially when with PTSD, depending on what it is, a lot of times it disrupts our attachment, our ability to connect with
Mhm.
people. And so having that work to repair, because we need these relationships,
Yes.
right, to bring about healing,
So
is
good.
pretty
That's so
incredible.
good. Because joy means, from a life model lens, but also rooted in the science with Alan Shore, it's good to be together, right? It means you're the sparkle in
Yes.
my eye. I enjoy you. And when things get tough with our relationships, we don't feel that enjoyment all the time internally. And so, but
Right.
if we can show up
Right.
like our true identity, where it's like, hey, even though I don't feel like it, I'm going to do what I can to muster up. And it's not fake. It's more, I'm going to show up like my true self. Now,
Yeah.
eventually, as you work this maturity growth, you're going to be able to return to joy internally too from upset. And that's another life model skill, is that idea of, I feel upset. Now I'm returning to joy. I'm returning to glad to be together with you. And that is really going to help the nervous system with PTSD.
Yeah, well, I think with the return to joy, what really, when I talk to my clients about this, what they are shocked by often is because PTSD hijacks you, right? It's like it feels like a loss of control over my body, over my thoughts, over my emotion. The fact that you can teach them all of these skills, and there's so much neuroscience behind it, where it's like, we can recover from this. You can build capacity where this does not take control over you, and you can have peace in your body again.
You can have peace in your body.
I mean,
yes.
What hope?
And big picture here, like, let's just say the biggest aspect of all of this is that when we do this, we build joyful belonging in community with God and us. Yes. And like, that's where it's at. Like, that's what we're created for. We're created for joyful belonging and community, right? That feels like I belong, I fit. There's a place. I was talking to my own therapist this morning, and I said, that's what I want most in life, is this belonging. And that's my goal, is to bring this to other therapists so we can bring it to people, because this is really where it's at. The biggest, my why in life is belonging. Bam, that's it. And if we have joyful belonging, that is resiliency against PTSD.
Yeah.
Because we can suffer well instead of being traumatized. It's so good.
That's right.
So good.
That's right.
So just as a final note here, let's just speak to all of this and more is present in our Life Model Informed Therapy modules. So if anybody who's listening, if you have not accessed our modules yet, check us out on cftinstitute.com. We definitely have a lot of content here on the podcast and a lot of other places. We're on socials and such, but we really want you getting those modules. We have our whole basic training done, and all of this info and more is in this. We have our first standard protocol in module 2, which is going to teach you about joy and rest, shalom for the body. We didn't even mention that. Like, you know, you can calm your body down with these life model approaches, all rooted in neuroscience, all rooted in accurate theology. So check us out. And Alyssa, thank you so much for having these combos and talking with you. I have joyful belonging with you. I love it. It's awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, girl. We'll talk again soon.
All right.